So, and I've been working with these groups now since 1986, if you can believe it. And the reason is that it's joyous work. When you preserve something, nothing happens. But there's a whole lot that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that nothing happens. This was supposed to be a 17-lot subdivision of Harvey Geiger's, and he rushed to get the approval of the subdivision because the state was changing its Title V regulations, so that you had to have now 10,000 square feet per bedroom, and so you had to have larger lots. So he wanted to get as many lots as he could before the rules changed and he'd be grandfathered in. So over the years, Robert Hankey, as your president, had been going up to Harvey and saying, "Harvey, when are you going to give us that land?" And Harvey said, yeah. And finally he said, "Harvey, now you got to give us your land before you subdivide it." "No, I got to subdivide it, protect the value, but you can buy it from me." And so, bless his heart, Harvey Geiger worked with us, gave us the time, which is just as important in these purchases as the dollars, the time to put together the funding proposals, which resulted in eventually the purchase of the entire 17-lot subdivision. I've got a little cheat sheet here. 68 acres of upland we've added to the 17 lots with all the other projects that we've done are on the periphery. Most recently, the 5 acres that Denny just talked to you about. But from 1994 up through this year, which is almost 30 years, we've been patchworking this whole area now. We have 68 acres of upland, 186 acres in total, including the marsh behind me here. Includes the 5-acre Fox Island. It's hard to discern from this angle, but you see this closest bit of woods here. That's Fox Island, it's about 5 acres in size. The Wellfleet Conservation Trust owns half, the State Fish and Game owns half. And at 68 acres of upland, owned primarily by the town, a little bit by the trust, and behind us here, that's the largest town local conservation area north of the Orleans Rotary. Little Wellfleet, how did you do that? Well, I got to tell you that it was not easy, but here's one. Here's an article from 1998. Open land valued at $830,000 could become Wellfleets at no cost to local taxpayers. Well, it wasn't given. Where did that $830,000 come from? It came from people like you making donations to the Capital Fund Drive of the Wellfleet Conservation Trust so that they can help buy the land. We also got a state grant to pay for half of it. But that was just one of these projects. And soon thereafter, this was 1998, we passed the Cape Cod Land Bank Bill. Wellfleet voted in overwhelming majority, 60+%, in favor of adding the 3% surcharge to your property tax on the open space. And from 1998 to 2007, that was the land bank era when most of these acquisitions that we did came together. So the town now had a ready fund to buy land. We now have morphed that into the Community Preservation Fund, which is still ongoing and helping to buy land as well as affordable housing and recreation and historic preservation. But that local funding source leverages a lot of other monies, particularly state monies. So in total here, about $4.5 million has been spent to buy the 68 acres of upland and the marsh. State paid for more than half. The town paid about a third, and the rest was raised privately through the Wellfleet Conservation Trust. So it's really that leveraging ability of your little land bank and community preservation fund to leverage state grants, private fundraising, put it all together, and the result is this wonderful trail system now it's open to the public. Are you going to be talking about Indian Neck later itself? No, but okay, well I'll do it. Yeah, go ahead. So Indian Neck is the long bit of land across the marsh. Yeah, this map doesn't show it very well. In any case, that was the place where the last Native Americans were living in Wellfleet. I know I have better historians here than I, but through the end of the 1700s, by 1800 there were a dozen Native Americans living in Wellfleet. Of course, this was all their territory for 10,000 years. The last Native American called the last Wellfleet Indian was Deborah Sampson, missing her last name, Christian name. And there is a plaque out on Great Island to her. I think you've seen it.
Oh, yeah.
So, but Indian Neck was kind of, I don't want to call it sequestering, but it was kind of that, right? And in 1979, the excavation of one of the septic systems over there unearthed a mass of bones. And the National Park Service came in with archaeologists from the state, excavated it professionally. It is now the best documented archaeological site in New England. And it's called the Indian Neck Ossuary. It was written up in Scientific American. And from the carbon dating, we know that there were people living there in the year 900, plus or minus 200 years. We know that this whole place was occupied for 10,000 years. As soon as the glaciers receded, that's when the native tribes started to move into this area, about 10, 12,000 years ago. But we know that certainly as early as 900, there were people living on Indian Neck. So it's an amazing landform itself. At the far end, as we walk around here, you'll see a little eroding bluff, and that is owned by the Wellfleet Conservation Trust, donated by Barbara Wise, and very important for the nesting of the diamondback terrapin. Everybody know our friend the diamondback terrapin? You want to pass that around? So the diamondback terrapin, this is the northernmost extent of this threatened marine turtle, the diamondback terrapin. And you have been lucky to have the world expert on the diamondback terrapin, and Bob Prescott, working at the Audubon Sanctuary for most of his last 30 plus years before he retired. And he has tracked terrapins with radio telemetry. He's excavated places for the terrapins to nest. I went on that hill in early summer about 30 years ago. It was the most amazing sight. There were 20 diamondback terrapins coming up the sandy bank to dig their holes. And I had no idea. I thought this was a rare species. Well, guess what? They're pretty common in this marsh. They feed in the marsh, they nest in the sand along the periphery. And so the state Secretary of Environmental Affairs at the time, I think that was Governor Wells' administration, when the state bought the end of Indian Neck, which was the Indian Neck Wildlife Management Area at Field Point, and we were having a press conference organized by the Wellfleet Conservation Trust, inviting the secretary. The governor's the most important environmental person to come down and speak to us. Well, of course, the caravan from Boston of the big black SUVs were late because of traffic, bridge, blah, blah, blah. We're all waiting out there, the select board, you know, and one of these people are going to show up. And we didn't have cell phones in the 1990s that worked very well. So I walked back up this Anawan Road here, the dirt road on the edge of the marsh, to see if maybe they were lost. I could flag them down. And sure enough, here comes the big black SUVs. And I said, yeah, it's right down this dirt road, just follow it, you can't miss it. So they roared off, and I walked back, and as I walked back, what wasn't there when I walked out was now there, a crushed diamondback terrapin, presumably run over by the Secretary of Environmental Affairs. So we got to the event, and I said to Robert Hankey, I think they just crushed one of the turtles. And he said, don't mention it. So anyway, that's enough for now.
Was there a fresh water source on Indian Neck?
Well, you know, it's interesting, and Mary talked about Pilgrim Spring. There was some kind of a spring at Sewell's Gutter. Now, I don't know if that was the Pilgrim Spring, or sometimes they call them Indian Springs. They're certainly scattered all throughout the Cape Cod Bay shore. There's one in Brewster that is owned by the certainly in Sandwich there's several, I know, West Barnstable. I don't know of the ones back here, but I did read about something at Sewell's Gutter at one point, a freshwater spring.
I'll just add, the Autobahn has a program for the terrapins, and they have groups all through town that volunteer and watch for the nesting, and then finally when the eggs hatch and coming out, and that's about the time, that's what's going on right now. We have one on Old Wharf. I know anyone from Lieutenant Island have seen that. There's one right behind the mobile station that's a conservation trust area that's also a nesting area. So it's a very aggressive program that they have, and I think it's been quite successful.
And we have a biology teacher here in Wellfleet, Barbara Brenessel, who's written the book.
Diamonds in the marsh. Diamonds in the marsh.
Yeah, I mean it's a fascinating story.
She's devoted her whole retirement life to those diamondback terrapins.
And how did the diamondback terrapin become threatened and almost extinct?
People ate them.
1900, they were shipped in barrels to New York to become turtle soup.
So, all right, we're going to move on. You're ready to move on, I'm sure. So we're going to walk along the marsh, and we're going to eventually get to Whalebone Point, where there's another great vista, and we can point out what you're seeing there. But before that, we're going to take a small diversion off the marsh up into some woods, where there's a platform and where there was a burial that took place there about 10 years ago that we're going to talk about. So we all ready? Everybody? Okay.